Hello, what is up, everybody? Today I am coming to you to bring a little bit of help in the regards of how to get, how to move forward when it comes to the end game process. And I want to preface this with, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I was able to get from end game to kind of getting in the groove of what I understand to be the end game pretty quickly. It's not too much of a shock once you understand what's going on. I watched a lot of videos to get to this point, but I still have a long way ahead. So this is by no means, this is what you're going to be doing, maybe 70, 80 beyond, but I can at least get you to that point so it's not too much of a shock to figure out. Post campaign, you're most likely going to you're going to be seeing your quest guide. You're going to open up your quest guide and you're going to see a number of quests under this icon, that little cross icon. That little cross icon is going to be really important because it's going to introduce you to these world events. You of course have some PvP ones. I'm going to say to ignore those early on, unless you just want to pick up, maybe you can sneak in one of the rituals for your grim favors. I'm gonna say avoid those entirely. I think myself, if I remember correctly, it was in one of these areas where I had my beginner quests. It sets you up with one, I believe, and then it opens up the rest as you explore more. But basically, it's gonna give you these quests to understand some of these events. Alright, so now we have gathered enough Whispers of the Dead to collect our reward from the Tree of Whispers. You could have done this a number of ways. I personally did it with 2 dungeons, that way I get it done quickly with those 2. But you can do this any number of ways, whatever way you feel the most comfortable. Maybe you want to do easier ones, like doing these little underground pits here that are super quick. Maybe you want to do PvP, say if you're a higher level. But I prefer just to do dungeons just to get it over with. I personally only do these maybe once or twice in between dungeons to kind of break up the monotony, but however you prefer to do it is fine. The reason why I do like to do these, I don't like to skip these all together. Some people don't like doing these at all. They do have some benefits in that you can get, like you can see here, I have a grand cache, but I have legendary grand caches as well. So I have greater collection of helms, collection of amulets. I personally really could use an amulet, but as you can see, there's different rarities to this. So we'll go ahead and accept our amulets, and then go ahead and grab. Oh, looks like I had too much in my inventory already, but it's gonna give us a number of things. Most importantly, an amulets. Which is not the best amulet of all amulets, but now that I've gotten essentially a full inventory of gear, however, I'll show you that what I like to do with my gear and what maybe will help you filter out a lot of that to make it a little bit easier on yourself. I'm gonna switch my camera to the other side so it's not so crazy though, real quick. All right, so now we are outside of the vendor. Kiowa Shot's a great place for this because they're just right next to each other, a vendor and breaking down the gear. I'll show you what I like to do with my gear that I don't use, and maybe kind of give you an idea, no matter what class you're playing, to figure out what to do with your gear. I personally set a limit for any piece of gear that I do not need, that I want to vendor. Anything over like 15,000 I'll vendor. Or under 15,000 I'll vendor. But it's also important to know that you're going to have items that you need to gather in order to properly give your items aspects. So this is a great example here. This staff, while not terrible, is not something that I would use personally. 23,000 though, that's a great item to vendor. You can mark it however you want. You can simply mark all of these as junk and then sell or something like that. Do it by the mass clearing ways if you want to, but I'm going to just kind of go through these individually and kind of choose which ones I do like and don't like. So since I just realized that when I switched out my gloves that I'm basically, you can't use 2 of the same aspect. There's really no purpose to anyways. It'll gray it out like it's right here. So let's go ahead and change out an aspect. The reason why I say look at the aspects of your gear before you get rid of them is because you may want to use them. Aspects can be added to your gear from your inventory as well as your codex of power. So if I look at something like this, I can go through it, and then what I like to do is I'll add the piece of gear in first. That way it limits which ones we can use, because you can only apply certain aspects to certain parts of your gear. So if I go into here, I can see what I can use with my class. So distant enemies, damage, poison. I'm going to use poison, thorns, hurricane, pulverize, and earth skill, which is the one we're using right now, and then blood howl. So let's see if we have anything in my inventory that might make it a little bit better. I like to add ones that I think I might use at some point. So skills deals up to 13% increased damage based on your available primary resource. Earth and Might now applies to your storm skills. I don't use storm skills, but I feel like I might at some point. When you hit a crowd controlled enemy, there is a 40% chance for that crowd control to affect the spread of another infected enemy. That'd be great for like slows, but I don't feel like I necessarily need that now. Not unless I'm adding something on top of what I'm already doing. Damage from Earth skills slow enemies. I think I already have one right here. Yeah, 45% versus 50%, but I don't need that extra 5%. So I think this one is going to be a good choice right here. So let's apply from inventory. So 13%. And then we'll add that onto there. So now we have an additional aspect onto that piece of gear. I'm not going to go too far in depth about how aspects work, but most important thing you can pull from this is that gear that you get, you're going to kind of start filtering out. Are you going to get rid of it for the gold? Because the stats aren't great. Are the stats great, but maybe the aspect is great? You can switch. The aspect isn't great, so you can swap that out. Maybe the aspect is good, and you want to keep it in your inventory for another piece of gear later on. From my understanding, once you have a piece imprinted, so like I add this to my gear. Now I've added this to my gloves. Now I cannot remove this from from these gloves. You can only imprint something once. You can't just remove and constantly move and replace. That's why I have like this necklace right here, the shockwave necklace. It's very difficult to find, so you end up having to farm for certain aspects at a certain point, and that's why I say doing your Tree of Whispers is not pointless, because you can get those aspects that you're looking for. Even if it's not great gear, it's aspects. Aspects are going to be the most important. Of course, they could be lower level aspects, and what I mean by that, this says skills deal up to 13% increased damage. The range right next to it, 10 to 20%. It could have been 20, but I got 13. So it's like, so that varies depending on maybe the drop, where it dropped. If it dropped on Tree of Whispers versus a Nightmare Dungeon, or how difficult the content was. So be mindful that whenever you're getting pieces of gear, that it can vary wildly depending on where it's dropped. Another easy thing to do if you're ever wondering where to spend your obols, or like how are you spending your obols late game, like why am I still getting these? Another great way to farm aspects is to go ahead and grab whatever aspect, how that aspect drops. Say if this shockwave aspect, it typically is it's considered an offensive aspect, so you're probably going to see it on weapons, gloves, I think rings and amulets. So you could grab a bunch of gloves, farm gloves, because they're only 40 obols as opposed to rings, which are 60, and try to farm those aspects out of those gloves, because you can get legendaries from this vendor. So even if the gear is not great, you can use the aspects, and if the gear ends up being great, you can swap it out for an aspect that's great. So it's like, don't think that a piece of gear is not good just because it is an orange. Don't think of a piece of gear being not as good for because it doesn't have the right stats, because in the end you can modify those. Oh, look at that. Oh, my mount. I got a mount as well. I didn't even realize. I'll activate that at the end. So you can change those things out, and even if the stats, say the stats are just off, like I myself, whenever I see willpower, I just get like, I get kind of bummed out because it's like I wish it just didn't have that willpower aspect there. So say I go to, let's see, what would be a great one to do? Slow duration reduction on these boots. That would be a great one, but I already have that applied to that one. Let's see, lucky hit chance, damage to crowd control enemies, damage to distant enemies, maximum spirit. Okay, maximum spirit to me is not the best. So I can take a piece and I can swap out maximum spirit. I need to have fiend roses though. Very important to get those crafting materials. And I could swap out the stat for another random stat. Note that it is random and you do not get refunded if you do not pick a stat. So it's important to know that the gear that you get isn't necessarily set in stone. You can modify it to a little bit. You can take parts out of it. You can change it up a little bit. Don't give up on that piece of gear. Like for example, I still have my axe, because just in case this staff doesn't turn out the way I want it to, I could go back to the axe. That's what I use my stash tabs for, just to grab other pieces of gear that maybe worked out better in the past. I accidentally sold one of my rings, and so I put that ring back in the ring slot. So things happen, but that's the important part to know about gearing, especially after doing Tree of Whispers, and then how those can benefit you and why you want to do them. So those are the easiest things you can do. Once I'm gonna get into Helltides, Legion events, world bosses, and dungeons. These are a little bit more complicated, but these are the easiest ways that you can essentially start gearing yourself slowly but surely along the way. These aren't necessarily the best ways to get XP, but you can at least get yourself started. The next thing we're going to talk about is going to be, we've talked a bit about the post-campaign quest and what those offer with our Tree of Whispers, and how that contributes to your gear. The next thing you're going to see is going to be your first experience in Nightmare Dungeons. I think it has you do your first Nightmare Dungeon in Kyovashad. And what that does, or what the purpose of it is to give you harder and harder content for better and better gear. So you're going to be using your sigils in order to make that process a little simpler. The way I like to do it is I like to sort of sort my aspects or my sigils. They're not sorted very great right now, so I'm going to sort them super quick, and I'm going to show you how I prefer to do it. That way you can have an idea of maybe what will help you along the way. All right, so now that I have my sigils sorted, I'm going to show you how I sort them to kind of help you a little bit. There's a few things to understand, is that not all dungeons are created equal. Some dungeons you can do a higher tier just because of how they play out. They're a little bit easier. Or if you're doing solo versus group. I personally like to do stuff and focus on only stuff that's good for solo content, because typically if it's good for solo, it's going to be good for group. There might be ones that are more optimized for group in that you can clear out more mobs because you are a group. But if you focus on ones that are solo, that's what I recommend, then they're typically going to be pretty good also for group content as well. So I've sorted these ones that are good for leveling up top, and then ones that are good for glyphs on the second row, and then ones that I'm ready to salvage. These are ones that I don't think they're going to be very good. Note that something can be on either of these, either good for leveling or good for your glyphs, and you'll still get rid of them. And the reason why is that the affixes, the things that cause it to be more difficult, are just too tough for you to deal with. Most people don't mind if it is just a really good dungeon to do it anyways. Some of the ones that make your dungeons tough if you're really trying to farm, though, are things like resource drain. It's really going to slow you down. It's really going to be sluggish. So some affixes you'll learn or come to understand that are just tougher. Any sort of explosion or blood boil, the little blood boils that come into it, I don't like doing those, so I'll get rid of those personally. But to each their own, whatever your preference is. But I like to sort it this way to kind of have a good amount here. As you can see, a lot of these are very different. I've run higher level dungeons that are higher than my level, and I've run ones that are lower too. I like to keep a semi decent mix. Well, some that are I guess 5 or so tiers above me, and some that are like 5 or so tiers below me, because sometimes you're running with lower levels as well and you want to help them out. So I like to help out people as well that I come across, so I like to keep them around. So if you are in that group where you're kind of wanting to run higher level tiers, feel free to join on stream live. I'll try to run as many people as I can in stuff that is my tier level, but if you want to do a dungeon just to understand this better, and I can show you a little bit more of the dungeon experience, feel free to join the group. As well, I'm going to leave in the comments a guide essentially to know which dungeons are good for what, because you're going to be leveling your glyphs a lot for your Paragon tree early on. You're going to want to get those up to I think level 15, and then you're also going to be wanting to level your character, of course, because it's going to be important. So these two important things are going to be part of the dungeon experience and why this is so big end game. So let's first get rid of some of those consumables that are the sigils that we're not going to use. So I'm going to salvage, and I'm going to, just like I do with armor or weapons, I'm going to salvage these, and these are going to give me sigil powder. In return, I can also use that sigil powder to craft more sigils. As you can see, I can craft a few of the ancestral ones here. And then on top of that, I can craft sacred ones as well. So with the sigil powder, I'll craft these. Note the tier range. You may see this range and be just like that person that I grouped up with a while ago who was level 64 using tier 1 still. Understanding the sigils the way I've understood them, like I said, give or take whether the dungeon allows for you to maybe do a harder tier. I think let me give a good example. Let's see, Gold Run Canals. Gold Run Canals is a fantastic dungeon to run for glyph leveling, but you could probably run something 2 tiers above your current tier, whatever tier you're facing. But how do you calculate that? The easiest calculation I've seen, you might have a different calculation than I have, is to take your level and subtract 51. So right now I'm 61, so that would mean it's pretty easy. Tier 10 would be my range. But as you can see, this or maybe you can't see because it's a little bit blocked here, but the sigil right here gives me tier 6 to 10, so I could get a tier 6, and this gives me 11 to 15. So I'm seeking something that's higher than my level or something that's lower than my level. So let's try to create a couple of these and see what comes out. So let's make these 3, 15, 11, and 15. So I got a couple of great ones. Pharaoh's Den is a good one. Alderwood Nightmare is also another great one, but they're tier 15, so I can't really use them right now. I did get a Shift to Ruins that was tier 11, and Shift to Ruins is a pretty good B tier dungeon. So that would be a great one for glyph leveling, so we could use something like Shift to Ruins for glyph leveling, and keep that around. But say I found nothing that was worth my time, I could just salvage all those and just kind of keep on creating ones until I got what I wanted. It can be a bit arduous doing that. Know that whenever you complete dungeons, you will get more. So like you'll find ones that you'll want to keep, so ones that you may not use right now, maybe ones that are only good for group leveling, because it's really just about, and when you're in a group, it's about minimizing how much time you're spending in a dungeon. When it comes down to like true grinding of these dungeons, you want to spend as little time in the dungeons because you want to maximize the amount of experience gain you get. In the process of doing this, like I said, you'll be leveling your glyphs. You'll also be getting your Paragon tree built out. Let's go to our local town alchemist, I suppose. So we're going to go down here, and you may know this area, or you may only be familiar with this area because it is the area that you upgrade your potions, your healing potions. But if you go to these other tabs here, you can actually craft more elixirs. These items are, of course, stuff that you gather around the world. Not to fret, if you do not have enough, you can also refine your resources to replace them. So I can get more Galavine by simply giving up some of my Redamine. So you can replace those to get more items, and you can also just get straight up, they're called incenses. Incense, they give you straight out buffs. I really just focus on these because they give you 5% experience. 5% experience may seem small, but when you're doing so in 30 minutes, you could probably do, if you have a pretty good build, you could probably do something like, I don't know, someone tell me if I'm wrong, at like 4 to 6 minutes a dungeon, maybe you could do like 5 or 6. So with that being said, you're getting a lot of experience in that time. So being able to maximize how much you're getting out of that potion with dungeons, I think is really good. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's the same way across the board. I wouldn't necessarily be using these for your Tree of Whispers dailies, or maybe necessarily for like world bosses, but for Helltides, sure. For Legion events, sure. You know, you're probably spending a good amount of time doing those, and you'll get a great benefit from using these elixirs. So that is your essentially your main aspects for what you'll be using to farm your dungeons. And with that being said, really that's your main rotation. You're doing your Tree of Whispers in between your Nightmare dungeons, maybe switching from solo farming your dungeons to group farming. At a certain point, once you get around to level 70, you probably already opened up tier 3 whenever you did your initial quest after you finished a campaign. The same process applies to getting tier 4. I've already unlocked this because a few members of my clan helped me open up my my world tier 4. You have to be, or it's important that you have to clear your capstone dungeon. Oh my gosh, your capstone dungeon, which requires you to be level 70. I think mine still shows somewhere over here. Yeah, it's right here. Your Fallen Temple, where you'll face a familiar character. But after you clear that, you'll be able to open up World Tier 4 for level 70 plus. So it's kind of a goal that you're working towards after you've cleared this. Of course, you're working to build levels, but also to clear that capstone and hit World Tier 4 and get even more experience, gold, and more drops. All right, so an item that I like to use personally when it comes to Helltides, Legion events, and world bosses is going to be the Diablo Black Book. Of course, you can add this to your own Discord page. I have it added to mine. If you would like to, of course, I'm going to drop in an invite to the Discord page. You can even grab a role that's specifically for Diablo 4, and that's going to make it to where you get notifications when this stuff is happening to your Discord. If you don't want to do that and you'd rather just do it a little bit more manually, there's a website called helltides.com that has just like this. It's going to give you an idea of where those are. The reason why I like to use this for Helltides personally is because it's going to give me these references. What are these references? They are the events as well as the 175 Helltide chests. Now you can of course get good items from a number of the chests, but the 175 chests are basically the highest cost chests and give you the best opportunities for gear. I believe these have the opportunity to reset. Say you get them, you immediately go to the Helltide once it starts. You get to the chests, and then you're still in the Helltide still going on. I believe these do reset. I don't know the time period, so you have a potential of getting 4 chests if you're really on it. On top of it, maybe you're doing it in a group. I do recommend doing these in a group because you can get a lot more like a lot quicker versus solo play. But of course, just like with Nightmare Dungeons, you can do these solo. A good thing about the end game is that there are great opportunities to improve your growth with group play. But if you're nervous about playing in groups and you don't feel quite ready, you don't want to embarrass yourself, or you don't want to be the one person in the group who doesn't understand what's going on, please join the stream, ask any questions that you may have. If it's something that I don't know, we'll learn together. Or if you just want someone to kind of carry you through one of these experiences and then maybe introduce you to this process, then I have no problem doing that as well. So a couple of these things, a couple of these chests will be great for, like I said before, either great items, and if not great items, great aspects, and if not great aspects, maybe just good stats on gear. So it's all more opportunities to kind of increase your RNG chances without necessarily just doing the same thing over and over again. I personally like Helltides. I think they're a lot of fun, mainly because it does the world events stuff you're probably already used to, and you get great gear out of it. The spawns are pretty dense. I usually will pop a experience potion with it just because you can run into so many events and get a lot of experience out of it. So I think Helltides are worthwhile, especially in groups where you can kind of just chill, lay back, and just kill stuff for basically epic chests. I think they're much more fun than doing Tree of Whispers. I think each has their benefits, and each person will like things differently, but I think Helltides are great for that because they spawn up in your map randomly in a random spot, and you'll have to essentially tend to that area, do events, and kill mobs in those areas, and it's over, shortly after. So it ends quickly after it begins. It doesn't last that long. So whereas the Tree of Whispers, you can kind of keep on doing and resetting. Helltides are kind of a great a temporary or timed event that you can knock out super quick as well to kind of break up the monotony. The next thing is gathering legions. These, in case you're not familiar with the areas, these links will take you to points in the map where you can understand where they are a little bit better. I have most of the areas unlocked. Actually, I have all the areas unlocked so where I can see where all of these are. But you'll begin to understand these as time goes on, and you'll see the gathering legions. These legion events do happen frequently. The ones you'll probably see the least frequent are world bosses. Things like the Wandering Death is stirring in the Crucible Fractured Peaks. That means a world boss is coming, and they are killed pretty quick. That's why I say you want to have something like this Discord, and that's why if you want to join my Discord to have these notifications, it's super convenient, and it's going to provide you a lot easier method of getting on top of these and understand, like whenever you can, like as soon as you can. So the quicker you can jump onto these events, the more chances you have for loot. Even if you're not in a group, if you're playing solo, there's going to be a lot of people in your instance doing this. So it's like a way of doing group content without necessarily having to be in a group as well. So you have dungeon content and Helltides, which you can do solo in a group. You have legion events and world bosses, which are kind of like group content, whether you like it or not, because there's going to be other people doing the same content as you, which are great opportunities to either make groups as well as to just get gear in general. So really with that being said, that's going to be really the rest of your methodology for what you're going to be doing for your end game process. If there's anything whatsoever that you're having questions on, or maybe something that you're not quite sure on, when it comes to later end game, I don't want to make a video quite yet because once you get to the world tier 4 and you start doing higher tiers, there's it with bonuses as well as some great methodologies you can employ to maybe make your dungeon farming processes a little quicker. So if any of this helped you, please give the video a like, subscribe to the page, as well follow my Twitch page, because I will be doing more content just like this on stream where you can ask any questions that you may have. Join me for some of this world content, whether it's world bosses, Helltides, and whatnot. Or even if you just want me to explain something to you so you can do it yourself, that's totally fine. I want my streaming space and my YouTube space to be a space for casuals, because I do play the game casually, but I do enjoy like the end game aspect. So I want everyone to be able to enjoy it, no matter the platform you play on, no matter your skill level or experience with ARPGs in the past. I want you to be able to enjoy the game to a higher level of content, and not just necessarily just do dailies, and then kind of maybe give out before season 1 even begins. So if this video helped you, please subscribe to the page. And if you have any recommendations or help or questions that you may have, add them in the comments for me, and I'll try to address them in a future video as well. And I hope this was helpful. I know I kind of went on a bit about certain topics, but I hope it helps somebody out there, and hopefully I can break this into chapters, so it's a little bit easier for people to grasp as well. So thank you. That's all I got. Sorry this video was long. Sorry, I think that was a while. All right, bye for real. This is real.